The National Desk, America's News Now.
We have informed U.S. citizens and their family members with whom we are in contact that they will be assigned specific departure dates.
The first exodus of civilians leaving Gaza coming up, the deal that helped open the border, and how many Americans are now waiting to learn their fate. Interest rates remain for now, what the latest Fed decision means for the economy as future rate hikes hang in the balance.
I don't want to be striking. I want to be with my students. But sometimes asking for help, you have to be a little bit louder.
Teachers on strike, where, why, and just what parents are saying about it. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. We do begin with breaking news out of Martin County, Kentucky. Right now, an all-out rescue effort still underway to safely get to a trapped worker who's been buried inside a collapsed coal preparation building for the last 24 hours. Now, 2 workers were prepping the plant for demolition when it collapsed last night, trapping them inside. One of the workers has died. A trauma team was able to make a connection with him before he passed away. The effort to save the other worker is ongoing and extensive.
It's a very large operation. There's a lot of rescue workers there. What they're doing now is they're working in teams. They will rotate out because this is going to be a long process.
And tonight, in the ongoing Israeli-Hamas conflict, the first group of foreign nationals and injured Palestinians are now in Egypt after the announcement of the first sanctioned exodus since this war began. A total of 81 severely injured Gazans authorized to leave Gaza today. Meantime, 500 foreigners were also expected to cross out of Gaza at the Rafah border crossing. 5 of them are American workers, aid workers that were there, but there are an estimated 600 Americans in Gaza tonight. The deal, a result of an agreement between Egypt, Hamas, and Israel, marking a significant breakthrough following Hamas's initial attack and, of course, subsequent Israeli airstrikes that have killed thousands and sparked a humanitarian crisis. The border opening comes as Israel struck the refugee camp in Jabalia for a second straight day. The IDF claims it is a Hamas stronghold.
The IDF right now is fighting in face-to-face combat with Hamas terrorists inside Jabalia. Yesterday, when we eliminated one of their top terrorists, is that there was a second implosion of an entire tunnel network. And this is the same network that we see Hamas taking selfies of themselves, running on their way to carry out terrorist attacks in Israel.
The death toll of Palestinians now over 8,500, according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. And though not independently verified, Hamas says among those killed in recent strikes were 7 hostages. This, as the UN says, 64 of its aid workers have died in the last 3 weeks, making it the deadliest conflict for the UN to date.
The UN has never, ever lost so many people in a conflict situation.
And it comes as another attack is mounted against the U.S. and its coalition forces. A one-way attack drone, we're learning, has struck a military outpost in Syria. The drone strike bringing the total number of attacks on the U.S. to 28. We're talking about 16 attacks in Iraq and 12 in Syria. At least 7 have come since the U.S. carried out defense strikes on 2 facilities linked to Iranian-backed militias in Syria last week. Meantime, Yemen's Houthi militia claims to have launched several aerial attacks on Israel in opposition to the war, which analysts have said, if true, demonstrates the expanding capabilities of the Iranian-backed group. While the IDF has yet to confirm the claims, today it moved Navy boats into the Red Sea amidst the escalating tensions. In just 48 hours, Secretary of State Antony Blinken expected to return to the Middle East for a second time since this conflict began, with stops in Israel and other countries in the region in a perceived attempt at de-escalating tensions. Meantime, new House Speaker Mike Johnson working very hard to sell his Israeli aid plan to his Republican counterparts in the Senate. The speaker told senators he supports giving aid to Ukraine as well as Israel, but does not want them tied together. The legislation currently being debated in the House proposes sending aid to Israel by cutting funds to the IRS. That is something President Biden has said he will veto. Some Republicans wanted to offset the aid with cuts, but according to the Congressional Budget Office, doing that will actually increase the U.S. deficit by $90 billion over 10 years. And tonight, an expected House vote on the expulsion of embattled New York Congressman George Santos. Congress right now preparing to take up the bill. A two-thirds majority is needed to remove Santos. The congressman has pleaded not guilty to 23 counts of fraud, identity theft, and falsifying campaign reports, among other federal charges. Teachers in Portland, Oregon on strike today after a deadline passed with no deal for a new contract. The teachers have been negotiating for months over wages, class sizes, and teacher planning time. Classes were canceled for 45,000 students today, leaving parents scrambling. The district told the union a strike would negatively impact students, but some parents are supporting the walkout.
I want them to get a reasonable paycheck. I want them to have clean classrooms. I want our kids to have better school supplies. I want them to have a signed contract sooner than later. I want our kids to get back to school.
The Fed kept interest rates the same again today, not ruling out possible future rate hikes as it continues to watch inflation. But rate cuts, they say, are out of the question.
Reducing inflation is likely to require a period of below potential growth and some softening of labor market conditions. Restoring price stability is essential to set the stage for achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the longer run.
In September, the Fed forecasted one more quarter-point rate increase before the end of the year. The National Desk's Atra El-Nashar has more on the Fed's latest decision and an updated reading on the job market.
As Wall Street expected, for the second time in a row, Federal Reserve members voted to hold interest rates where they are.
Good afternoon, everyone.
The cost of borrowing money has skyrocketed since the Fed started raising rates in March of last year. Economist Rachel Saderberg.
Interest rates are a blunt instrument, right? They're not a scalpel. And in that sense, they have to take a very broad view of what interest rates are going to affect, right? And what they're trying to do is tamper down spending.
For the most part, that hasn't happened yet. The Fed says it will stop raising rates when inflation is on a sustainable path to 2%. The measure they pay most attention to shows inflation's currently at 3.7%. High interest rates also impacting government debt. According to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, interest is now the fourth largest expense in the federal budget behind Social Security, Medicare, and defense. Billionaire Stanley Druckenmiller criticizing Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen for not securing low pandemic-era rates on long-term debt, calling it the biggest blunder in the history of the department. He later said former Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin in the Trump administration was also at fault. Saderberg says while hindsight is 20/20, the Treasury was just one part of the equation. Congress and the Fed's policies also brought us to this moment.
It's all working together in one bigger picture. And so it's hard to say in a vacuum what one difference would have done.
The Fed also processing a new batch of jobs data. A Labor Department report shows September ended with 9.6 million open jobs. And an ADP private payroll report shows 113,000 jobs were added in October, with the education and healthcare sector coming in as the top job creator. The report also showed pay growth slowed to 5.7% year over year. It's not great news for workers, of course, but in time, Amira, economists believe that could help slow down inflation.
And Asher, we know another interest rate hike is possible before the end of the year. Any hint from the Fed about which way they may be leaning?
Yeah, sort of. So Powell was really clear that they have not made a decision yet about their December meeting and that they'll still be getting inflation data, jobs data, GDP reading. before they meet again next month in December. But he did say if two situations occur that could warrant further monetary policy tightening, aka another interest rate hike. And those two things are evidence that labor market tightness is no longer easing. And the second thing is more blowout economic growth. We saw a GDP report that showed almost 5% quarterly growth. That makes the Fed a little uncomfortable because it adds to that inflationary pressure that drives up prices. But we'll know what their decision is on December 13th at the end of their next two-day meeting.
We are watching and waiting. Atrel Nashar live in Washington, D.C. for us. Thank you so much. Well, a banking expert testified today that former President Donald Trump and his business benefited from inflating his net worth. Donald Trump Jr. also took the stand today, denying he was involved in the preparation of his father's financial statements. Eric and Ivanka Trump are also set to testify, but Ivanka's lawyer is appealing. In Trump's classified documents case, Judge Eileen Cannon is considering whether to extend several ruling deadlines, and she heard arguments today. The former president's lawyers asked for an extension, saying Trump and his co-defendants still hadn't gotten access to some of the materials said to be classified. We're also waiting to hear if Cannon will move the trial date at the request of Trump's team. Former President Trump suing Michigan's Secretary of State to stop efforts to leave his name off the state's 2024 primary ballot. The question revolves around a section of the 14th Amendment, which disqualifies a person from running for federal office if they have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the U.S. A trial in Colorado is already underway on the topic, and it's now in its third day today to decide if Trump can be on its ballot in 2024. And coming up, child care costs. They are skyrocketing across the country. The unique way one state is attacking the problem. Then why fertility in men has dramatically dropped, the common device thought to be the biggest factor. Plus, how the community is reacting to a migrant influx in one Massachusetts town. We are back in 90 seconds. Patrick Dye, a 21-year-old junior at Cornell, was in court today charged with posting threats to kill or injure another using interstate communications. Police say he is the person behind direct threats online against Jews on campus over the weekend. His father told the New York Post Patrick is suffering from severe depression. He did not enter a plea today. If convicted, he can face up to 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. New York Governor Kathy Hochul is hoping this arrest will deter others.
But I want to make an example and say, as I said on Monday when I told those students, if you do this, you will be caught and you'll be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
3 top military nominees are another step closer to their posts. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer took preliminary steps to advance those individuals as Chief of Naval Operations, Air Force Chief of Staff, and Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps. This comes while Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville has put a hold on group military nominations for months.
We absolutely must ensure that our military is fully staffed and fully equipped to defend the American people. And it begins by confirming these vital nominations that are currently on hold.
Tuberville is keeping a hold on all other nominations because of the Pentagon's abortion policies for service members. This is keeping the Senate from passing nominations as a group as they normally would do. Meanwhile, on the House side, the Oversight Committee claims they have evidence that President Biden received $40,000 in laundered money from Chinese business deals. Chairman James Comer said the money came in the form of a personal check from his brother and sister-in-law that the committee now has.
Without his family peddling his name and his son threatening a CEFC associate with consequences that he said Joe Biden knew about, James wouldn't have had the money to write the $40,000 check to his brother Joe.
The president has denied similar allegations in the past. Comer says the committee will continue to investigate. Well, the average child care payment is dramatically outpacing overall inflation since 2019. According to new data from the Bank of America Institute, payments are up 32% over the last 3 years. The Consumer Price Index was up 20% over that time. The costs are driving some parents out of the workforce all across the country. The National Desk's Mackenzie Richmond is in Tulsa examining what the Sooner State is doing to fight the growing problem in Oklahoma.
Families are the backbone of our economy.
At the base of that is the childcare industry. Every single sector of our economy needs childcare.
When parents don't have childcare, they can't go to work, or they have to work reduced hours, or it's got a whole domino effect.
Right now, 55% of Oklahoma does not have access to a childcare program.
There's no slots for infants. There's no slots at all. There's no slots nearby, or they're not affordable.
And the places that are available are either incredibly expensive or they're just not very good. You know, it's just like a place you walk around and you see red flags. It does give me anxiety about what the future is going to be like for kids.
The lack of accessible and affordable childcare costs the state over $1 billion in productivity, revenue, and taxes. And that number is expected to rise as federal funding for childcare programs implemented during the pandemic expires. As a result, 70,000 childcare programs are likely to close.
3.2 million children could lose childcare.
With the U.S. workforce on the line, the Biden administration has requested $16 billion in emergency funding to provide temporary relief nationwide. In the meantime, State Representative Schreiber wants to enact long-term solutions in Oklahoma. This coming session, Schreiber plans to repropose House Bill 2451. If passed, the bill would provide a tax credit to child care workers to help recruit and retain, and to employers.
Where the employer would share costs with their employees, parents, and take some of the burden off of them. And at the end of the year, their business gets a tax credit for sharing that cost.
Schreiber says similar bills have proven successful in other states and is hopeful it will pass in Oklahoma.
$1.8 billion in damages. That's what a Missouri jury says the National Association of Realtors and some brokerages are liable to pay out to home sellers in a major antitrust lawsuit case that's really shaken the real estate industry. A federal jury found the real estate trade group guilty of conspiring to keep commissions for home sales artificially high. It's a decision that has the potential to rewrite the entire structure of who and how commissions are paid. The association says it plans to appeal. The U.S. infant mortality rate up for the first time in more than 2 decades. The CDC finding the overall rate rose by 3% last year. Infant deaths due to preeclampsia rose 8% and bacterial sepsis 14%. Experts say the jump could be a result of the COVID pandemic, which put a strain on health resources. But it comes as a new study finds that cell phone usage may be contributing to lower fertility rates among men between the ages of 18 and 22 who use their phones more than 20 times a day. Those men, they say, have a 21% higher risk of low overall sperm count, higher than those who use their cell phones less than 5 times a day. A review of medical studies last year found worldwide Male fertility has fallen by 50% in the last 50 years. The exact reason is unknown, but electromagnetic fields created by some electronics like cell phones may play a part. But scientists are also studying other potential causes, like chemical changes in food and water and an increase in obesity rates. 5 million more Americans will now be eligible for lung cancer screenings under new American Cancer Society guidelines out today. They recommend that even heavy smokers who quit at least 15 years ago should get yearly scans based on new conclusions from diagnostic data. Lung cancer kills more Americans than breast, colorectal, and prostate cancers combined. Last week, we reported that a simpler version of Alzheimer drug Leqembi could be just as effective. It comes as researchers come up with more and more potential treatments. Our team in Albany reports on the innovation happening in the field.
I just consider myself so lucky that I have been able to get into this program, because I would probably be, I don't know, maybe not even be able to think hardly otherwise.
Carolyn King is one of the many people who comes to the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center in Albany regularly. She's participating in a clinical trial for an Alzheimer's medication, an injection she was getting every 2 weeks.
I give my own. It's just 2 little needles and you're done in 1 minute. And it's great.
Hers is one of 17 clinical trials operating out of this Albany office. Now researchers are urging people to sign up for the latest one, this drug called LIFT-AD. LIFT-AD would be for mild to moderate cases of Alzheimer's disease. It aims to repair neurons to regenerate the brain. Right now, doctors say a lot of Alzheimer's research is focused on early stages of the disease.
But also, we don't want to forget the people who are affected, who've had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or similar for some period of time.
And in terms of committing to a clinical trial, Carolyn King says the regular appointments, the potentially long drive to the facility, the shots, all of it's worth it.
I can still function, I can still take care of myself, I can drive, and I'm not sure. If I was not coming here, I don't think I would be able to be doing all that.
Coming up, how a milk carton shortage is impacting schools and what parents are saying about it. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America.
I am totally against it. I believe we should take care of our veterans first and leave the immigrants be immigrants. They're illegal. They don't belong here.
We have to do what we can do, and I think it's the right thing to do. That's my opinion.
There's mixed reviews in Seekonk as the town becomes the latest in Massachusetts to house migrant families under the state's right to shelter law. 40 families are currently being housed at the Ramada Hotel on Route 44, a half-mile from the Rhode Island state line. The town administrator says they're working with the state and the National Guard to help the families during their stay. In a statement, he said an increase in the number of families will undoubtedly place a strain on town resources, adding, quote, This strain will be particularly noticeable within the school department, which currently lacks the physical space and adequate personnel to effectively manage an influx in student enrollment.
While the sudden shortage of milk cartons is impacting our local school districts now, supply chain experts say the issue stems from just a few years ago during the pandemic. But parents and schools should prepare for this to last months.
Unfortunately, it's a supply chain issue within the paper industry. And so what happened in 2022 is that we had a lot of paper mills that closed. And that's just because there was a lack of demand. And that was primarily because of COVID. And then in 2022, we also saw some milk carton manufacturers close.
Not to mention major fires at paper distribution centers, leaving the industry suddenly behind on meeting that demand from everyone returning to school. Parents I spoke with say school districts need to find alternative solutions very soon.
Gather, bear. Gather. The bears at Camp Nelson are hungry and breaking into cabins looking for food. A homeowner in this Tulare County mountain community had a camera rolling as a bear approached, but a recording of a barking dog didn't faze the bear. Cabin owner Isabel Lopez says deterrents don't work.
We've got motion detectors, we've got sound detectors, we've got, those bear mats that they call them to put around windows. And, it seems like nothing is deterring these bears now.
California Department of Fish and Wildlife says the bears are on a tear because they need to load up their tummies before hibernation.
Analysts say more and more signs are emerging showing the popular weight loss drug Ozempic has the outsized power to upend the stock market and really shake up the economy. That's because of changing consumer habits that are seemingly pushing more Americans away from sugary snacks. This week, investors downgraded shares of Krispy Kreme donuts, projecting a loss in sales. Meantime, analysts are linking the drug's popularity to beer and snack stocks that began plummeting earlier this month. Even Walmart says it's seeing an impact on shopping demand, impact so big. This is being called the T-Swift of stocks, a well-deserved name. And that does it for this edition of the National Desk. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.